Bar for bar album reviews, Ransom, SE7EN. SE7EN is the latest project from Ransom and follows his many collab projects from last year with Nicolas Craven. Ransom's been pretty busy recently and over the past year or so has gotten a lot of well-deserved attention. With this project, he takes heavy inspiration from the 7 deadly sins: envy, gluttony, greed, wrath, lust, sloth, and pride, with each track really just going into each one. This project comes in at a total runtime of 22 minutes with 7 tracks, so it's a real quick listen. I think originally it was promoted as an EP, but all streaming services and everything else basically labeled it as an album. But either way, it's easy enough to run back multiple times so you can pick up on all the bars. SE7EN starts things off with Envy. This track is about envy as a deadly sin and how people's envy can turn other people against you. Or those people. I really dig this instrumental here too, but that's to be expected from Nicolas Craven, I suppose. Ransom starts off the track wondering why people envied him, but also understands that it's just kinda happens. Later on, he's in the car with his homie riding shotgun, but he also has a feeling that in the future he'll probably try to kill him, even though he thinks that's a silly thought. You just never know when envy will get the best of someone, even those who were really close to you. This uncertainty is also something that he addresses with "You can't trust a friend's a feeling you can't describe." Ransom gives us a slightly different perspective as the track wraps up, where someone was asking their brother for money. The brother denied him and ended up spending the money at the strip club. At first, that may sound selfish, and to the person asking for the money, yeah, sure. But the person who was going to give him the money knew that the money would probably end up being used to flip drugs, which would eventually land that guy in jail. This part, I feel, is more to let people who are, envious and jealous know that sometimes people do things for a reason and they're not just trying to keep you down. Next, we have Gluttony featuring Lloyd. Gluttony has a real laid-back, piano-laced beat provided by V-Don and NLCK, which fits the track really well. The gluttony in this case seems to be more along the lines of killing and sending people to Satan for supper. I think they're also touching a bit on how they've both been around for some time and have always been doing things their way and on their own rather than hiring shooters. The verse from Banks is solid as well, but that's, again, to be expected, especially given his recently released album, Curse of the Inevitable. I liked that the track is flanked by an intro and an outro from Dante, presumably from the Inferno, where he travels through the rings of hell. It just feels very fitting for this album and even this track. With Greed, we get another feature, and this time it's from Royce. This track is produced by Lord Sear and is a bit more triumphant and excited in nature, which is fitting for the idea of greed. The thing that came to mind when listening to the beat was like a king just on his throne. And since, a lot of times kings are depicted as greedy, it makes sense. This track is a bit abrupt in terms of sequencing though, given how laid back the last track was and how, loud this one is, but that's not a huge deal. This track is all about the greed of others and the lengths that people will reach to satisfy that greed. There's lots of dope bars and wordplay here, like Ransom's B and C lines alluding to Bloods and Crips, and Royce's line, "Who reppin' the culture when Megan's toes is of lesser importance than Kylie's divorce." I could spend so much time talking about this particular track, so let me know if you want a full breakdown of it. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks on here. Speaking of favorite tracks, another of my favorites is Wrath. This track's production from Troop the producer is different for sure in the sense that it's got a bit more of a guitar front to it, but I do really like it because it's a bit more aggressive, which, makes sense because it's titled Wrath. The chorus explains it best by saying how if you're in Ransom's path, you're going to feel the brunt of this pain, and you'll feel this fury, hate, anger, wrath. The mention of heroes not existing when it's time for villains to clash is also interesting, because it reminds you that the things that he's talking about on this track aren't necessarily heroic, and by a lot of people, including himself, I guess, it's villainous. I really also like how he starts off the second verse with "My diction's so clean I never have to stutter." This statement really grabs you and makes you want to listen to what he's saying here with the rest of the verse. It's like if you weren't paying attention already, you sure as hell are now. This brings us to Lust/LUST featuring IX Wolf or 9 Wolf. This track is produced by both 38 Special and Ransom and has a bit more of a soul sample to it, which is also fitting given the title. He lists off a few things to lust over, like getting his mom a house, understanding love because he's a family man, and the devotion to his craft that he's maintained over all these years. This track is pretty dope too because we get basically one really long verse from Ran, and then there's a bit of a break where XI Wolf or IX Wolf comes in singing at the end, saying, "I think I love you sometimes. You should let me love you sometimes," which creates the acronym of LUST from the title. As we begin to wrap things up, we get Sloth featuring JR, with production from Choop the producer again. Sloth in general, like as a topic, can be thought of as laziness. But in this case, I think it's more along the lines of not having ambition, or not necessarily doing things on your own, because towards the end of Ransom's verse, he says, "You choose a path or it chooses you, don't let your master confuse your view." Further evidence is at the top of his verse where he says, "What is living with no ambitions?" I don't know why I mentioned these in reverse order, but anyways, JR's verse goes a slightly different direction by showing he isn't sloth-like, but also talking about people who he feels have ambition, but for some reason lets others control them. The final track on this project is Pride, which is produced by Ransom himself and has a really dope sample to it. Here we get another long verse from Ransom where he's talking about his pride. Pride, to me, is one of the lesser sins because you kind of need pride to succeed, especially in rap. I mean, I feel like the general public or general rap listener doesn't really want to hear about how mediocre you are. And all they really want to hear about is how great you are and you being braggadocious, essentially. And that's whether it's talking about your skill or just whatever you have around you and like your accolades. I also like how he goes after people who say like are against rap by saying you criticize rap, but you never crafted a bar. It's still crazy to think that people are criticizing rap as a negative thing now that it's one of the most popular music out there. Like, rap is a legitimate form of art, not even just music, and I will continue to fight for that idea. It's insane to me. I guess this line could also be taken as reviewers criticizing particular songs and stuff like that, but I feel like that's a little bit less likely. I mean, who knows though. As a final track to this project, it's really solid. I like how he ends it with an outro essentially saying that he's created or at least evolved this style of rap, and then goes on to say, maybe that's just my pride talking. I just felt like it was a really good way to round out this track. Overall, this project was really solid. I know this is my first time reviewing a Ransom project, but that doesn't mean I haven't been peeping his work. He's been just so consistent for so long, and I'm happy that he's finally been getting his flowers over the past year or so. It's really well deserved. I like the idea of this album going through the 7 deadly sins because it's something that could be talked about very easily without getting religious about it. These sins are all part of us, really, and it makes sense to talk about. I was originally going to say I would have liked to have Ransom be the only person rapping on each of these tracks because I feel like he could give us a lot about each topic, but the way that it's been done is still really solid. This is normally where I list my 5 favorite tracks, but since there's only 7 tracks in total, I'm only going to list 3 of them because, that I would be listing the whole album otherwise. So, my favorite tracks here are Greed, Wrath, and Pride. I don't know what else there is to say about Ransom, honestly. I mean, he's just been so dope for so long. If this is your first exposure to him, luckily, there's a lot more music to check out for you, as well as his upcoming project with Big Ghost. So, that's definitely something to look forward to. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more than just that one project before the end of the year as well, so I'm excited to see what we got. That's all I have for this review. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this project, if you've listened to it. If you haven't, it's like 20-some minutes long. Just go listen to it. But also let me know what your favorite tracks are. Also, like and subscribe if you want to see more reviews and content like this, and share this with your friends if you feel like they'd enjoy it. With that said, thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.